What's good in the YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here bringing you another video. Today I'm bringing you a video on Lupinranger vs. Power Ranger Episode 3. This episode is called Take Them Back No Matter What, and the episode is really good. We got to see the reverse of the previous episode regarding the mecha and the finisher, where in this case the Lupinrangers got to do the finisher and the Power Rangers got to use their mecha. So that's cool. And we also got a lot of questions answered and a number of new questions introduced throughout this episode. So that's cool as well because I'm now very curious about what we'll learn about these in the future. So the episode starts off with us seeing the continuation of the previous episode. In the previous episode, the Power Rangers entered into the Lupinrangers cafe or bistro, and what actually happens is that they want to, get a meal. So that's what their plan is. And the thing is that the Lupinrangers realize right away that the Power Rangers have no idea who they are. Although what happens is that when they sit down, Power and Ichigo, or Kichiro, actually recognizes Kairi, and he asks, "You look familiar. Do I know you from somewhere?" And Kairi basically shuts down the question, just trying to say, "Oh, maybe you saw me somewhere. I don't know." He doesn't come across as giving up himself, which is important because they're police officers and they could arrest them theoretically. So that's really important to remember. So what does end up happening following this is that Toma actually tries to reach for one of the Power Rangers versus Changers to try to get it back because, they have the Lupin collection items as well, so they have to make sure that they can get them back at some point. But what happens is that Kairi basically stops him and says, let's not do this right now. And what happens is that eventually the Power Rangers get contacted and are told that they have to go and deal with a monster attack. So what does end up happening from here is the Power Rangers go up. The Lupinrangers are happy because they realize that the Power Rangers have no idea who they are, so that's good. And following this, what ends up happening is that Kagura ends up appearing, and he actually is there to collect the Lupin collection item that they got in the previous episode. So he ends up collecting that. What we also find out is that Kagura does know that the Power Rangers have versus Changers and also have Lupin collection items. He's not sure as to why they do, and all that information is still very unclear, but he will continue to investigate things. He's still very much so a mysterious character, but what also does end up happening is that Kagura gives the Lupinrangers their next mission, which is to deal with a monster named Nemario, which is an interesting monster that's sort of like a snail creature that can actually shoot like gum or something. Very sticky substance. So what does end up happening is that Nemario ends up attacking, and he actually creates a statue of Degranio, the leader of the Ganglers in the city, and it's actually a huge statue. So the Power Rangers actually get to deal with Nemario, and we get to see several different attacks used. There's also some fighting between the Lupinrangers and Power Rangers when the Lupinrangers appear shortly after, and that fighting doesn't go over very well. At one point, Sequoia actually gets stuck in some gum from Nemario, and what does end up happening is that there's continued fighting between Toma and the Power Rangers because, again, he wants to get their versus Changers. He wants to defeat them, and he keeps on focusing in on getting their versus Changers and beating on them. But Kairi keeps on trying to stop him, and at one point, after they retreat from their battle, because following this, they decide, Sequoia's stuck, we might as well just leave them there. And at that point, when they return back, there's a discussion that occurs with Kairi basically where Kairi and Toma talk about the idea that he was trying to get the versus changer, and he wants to just end it now. He wants them to know that they're not a problem anymore, the Power Rangers. And the thing is that Kairi says, why should we make them go away so quickly? Why can't we take use in them? They could actually be very useful to us even if they're against us. So that's very interesting. And the thing is that Toma has this preconceived notion of this being a bad thing, of them letting them last, because we end up learning in a backstory is that when Toma first got engaged to be married, what happened was that he initially never used a knife, and he was only using chopsticks. But because of his fiancée-to-be at the time, Aya actually convinced him to actually switch to using knives. And her big point that she brings up with him is something that can seem pointless at one time can actually be very useful in the end. So, that's a very interesting concept, and it makes a lot of sense. And this episode actually, later on reiterates that point in the story. So that's really cool to see. And I actually like that when I think about it, because it's a clever way of thinking about this episode. So what we do end up seeing is that in the flashback, Toma does propose to Aya, and what we also see is that he was a cook initially, and he was going to cook for her all the time. And what happened was that on the day that she was frozen and pretty much killed, what happened was that he was only 5 minutes away. They were on a phone call, and he said, "Oh, what's 5 minutes gonna do? It's not like you'll be killed or anything." And shortly afterwards, that's exactly what happens. And we see the continuation of the scene where she turns into the ice crystal form of herself and fades from existence into dust. So that all happens, and the thing is that we now know a little bit more about who Toma is, who his fiancée is. We actually know her name now, so that's important. And, should be very interesting to see where things will go from here. So eventually what does end up happening is that we end up seeing the Power Rangers back in their base. And what we end up having is this conversation between the Power Rangers where Sequoia is being scolded for his actions by Kichiro. And the thing is that, Sequoia feels bad for what he did, and he apologizes for his error in what he did in the previous mission. So following this, the Power Rangers get a distress call where it's actually a witness report, which is a fake witness report from Kairi, which tells Kichiro that apparently there was a attack in a studio district area, so maybe they should go down there and see if they can get Nemario. So that all happens. Two of the Power Rangers go off, which includes Sakusa and Kichiro. Sorry, I'm trying to think of the names now. Yes, those two go off. Then Hilltop stops Sequoia, basically telling him that you should put your all into it, and maybe that will make the difference in what you do in the future, and that will improve your abilities. So that's something that he takes to heart, and that will be important later on in this episode. And it's good that they are trying to give some focus towards both the Power Rangers and the Lupinrangers for this episode, even though it's primarily, so far, seems like it's focused towards the Lupinrangers. It's more of a life lesson, I guess, on the Power Rangers part, which I think life lessons aren't a bad thing if they're going to be relying on that, since they don't have the history of losing someone. So if life lessons are where they're going to go with story, not a bad thing. We'll have to see, obviously, if that's going to be a continuous thing or not, but I do like the idea behind that. So after that, Sequoia does go after the other Power Rangers and joins them as they head into the studio, where we end up seeing the Monster Snail Nemario, creating his own art again. And the thing is that he is supposed to be an art forger, so he's doing illegal art based off of prior made art pieces. So following this, the Power Rangers appear. They end up attacking Nemario, which he actually creates a trap, which when they appear there, they all get stuck in, and it's a gum trap. So yeah, they were, in a way, actually bait, because when Nemario goes out, he actually sees the Lupinrangers, and Kairi basically tells Toma, see, they were useful. We use them as bait. So in other words, something that seemed pointless at first, the fact that the Power Rangers existed seemed pointless, but in the end, what actually happened was that had they not been there, they wouldn't have been able to take the bait, and then at that point, the Lupinrangers wouldn't have been able to deal with Nemario and get what they needed. So that's important. So that's great to see as well. And so then following this, what happens is that the Lupinrangers have to deal with Nemario. We do end up seeing that the Lupinrangers use they actually unlock the safe and get out the Lupin Collection item, which, if you haven't noticed, a lot of the Lupin Collection items resemble different items in the Sentai franchise, whether it be Zords, mechas, characters, you name it. The Lupin Collection item for this one is actually the closed-up form of the Japanese equivalent of Orc the Conqueror. So if you've ever seen Orc the Conqueror in his closed-up form, this is basically that with a different color palette, which is interesting. So I do like the fact that they are referencing that. It does happen in some seasons, whether it be the characters themselves or something that they have, and I like the fact that the Lupin Collections items are actually based off of things from previous seasons. So that's cool. So following this, what does end up happening is that the Lupin Rangers get to use the Good Striker. They actually at first think they're going to have the fusion situation that the Power Rangers had, but in their case, rather than combining, they actually multiply. Although in this case, only one of them multiplies, and that one being Kairi. So Kairi multiplies into three of himself. So he has three of himself, and then there's the two others that are there as well. So we have five Lupin Rangers there, and what they do is they finish their attack with all three of the reds and blue and yellow, so that's cool to see. And actually the two of the reds don't use the versus changer, but they actually use the two different modes for their sword and the magic hand. So that's cool to see as well, that they're actually giving them different weapons to use in the different forms. So yeah. So following this, what we do end up seeing is that Gochi appears, and she actually makes Nemario grow, and at that point Nemario turns huge. But this time what happens is that Kagura is mentioned by Umika, because Umika mentions that I wonder if he knows anything about Goody. And the thing is that Goody actually recognizes Kagura's name, and he seems pretty worried about that name, which means that obviously he has some background with him, the two of them, so Good Striker and Kagura, which I'm curious as to what that actually means. Is Kagura a bad guy? Is Kagura a good guy? Does he just not like him? Why are they not on good terms? Very curious. So following this, what does end up happening after Goody freaks out, he actually joins the Power Rangers, which leads to the Power Rangers using Patoranger. So the Power Rangers actually get to fight Nemario. They do all sorts of cool attacks, and it's just a really cool battle. We also get to see Goody use a different uniform rather than the magic uniform based off the Lupin Rangers. He gets a police officer uniform, which fits the Power Rangers look and all that, and because they're police officers. So that's cool. So following this, what we do end up seeing is that the Lupin Rangers return back to their base, and the Power Rangers are happy that they managed to defeat Nemario. The Lupin Rangers end up communicating with Kagura about Goody, and they explain the whole situation about him. But the thing is that Kagura says that yes, the Lupin Collection has always had him, and he might be the main reason why that the Power Rangers actually can use the versus changers and are needed. So that's important. Also, he doesn't really align with anyone, and the other thing is that he's a very sneaky Lupin Collection item, so he definitely will run around time to time, and that's something that Kagura mentions, but there's also plenty of mystery that's still unclear about Goody. So that all happens. Eventually, the Power Rangers do arrive in the bistro again, and they feel bad that they weren't able to order a meal last time, so this time they come in, and the thing is that the Lupin Rangers shield Kagura from the Power Rangers just in case they knew him, and so what does end up happening is that when the Lupin Rangers turn back after they talk to the Power Rangers, Kagura's gone, and following this, Sakuya actually approaches Umika, and he immediately has a crush on her. Now, one thing I forgot to also mention, and I said this before, was the whole point of giving your all. Prior to them actually using the Pat Kaiser, and I forgot to mention this, Sakuya actually gives his all, blast Kichiro's gun, and then his gun blast the gum away from where Sequoia was, because they were all trapped, and then Sequoia, frees Kichiro, and then Sequoia also frees Tsukasa. So that all happened beforehand. I forgot to mention it because I'm sure some of you might be wondering, what about that whole point? Yes, that did happen. So then following this, we do end up seeing that Umika, yes, there is love interest between Umika and Sequoia, although Sequoia seems to be interested in Umika. Doesn't seem the same way for Umika, at least so far, although we don't really know, judging from how they talked and everything, and Sequoia pretty much knocks over Umika at one point, which was an accident because it also had to do with Kichiro getting in the way. So all this does end up happening. We also get a conversation between Kairi and Toma where Toma tries to create a joke, which is very serious because his character is not a, hyperactive or crazy character. He's a very, very serious character, and he suggests maybe putting in their food laxatives. And the thing is that Kairi's like, are you serious? That's not like, I hope you're not planning on actually doing it. He's like, it's just a joke. But it's just like, that's pretty screwed up, But overall, I would say this episode was pretty good. That last bit was kind of funny and ridiculous. The preview for the next episode does seem to show that Umika and Tsukasa will get focus. So they are doing their counterparts for the season, which is okay. I'm sure that will get mixed over time, and also there'll be episodes where it'll be only focused on one. But because it's so early, they're probably thinking we need to focus on having each of them get some focus each episode, or at least two, which makes sense. And that's fine. I'm looking forward to seeing next episode. Should be very good. It doesn't seem like we're getting a new trigger machine or dial fire next episode. I would imagine that's going to happen very soon in the next couple of episodes. I do not know when exactly, but we'll have to wait and see. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye, guys.